Margo Jenkins stared at the spreadsheet on her screen, wondering if death by boredom was medically possible. 34 years old, perpetually single, and firmly entrenched in middle management at an accounting firm so bland its logo was literally beige. Her life wasn't exactly a Hollywood blockbuster. "Another day in paradise," she muttered, taking a swig from her coffee mug that read, "I can't out today." The irony wasn't lost on her that she was, in fact, adulting extremely hard at 7:42 in the morning. Her commute was always the same. Apartment to subway, subway to office, office to existential crisis, rinse and repeat. Today, though, the universe decided Margo Jenkins deserved a plot twist. It started with a light. Not the inspirational, metaphorical kind, more the "why is there a spotlight in the subway tunnel" kind. The train stopped. Passengers grumbled. Margo rolled her eyes so hard she practically saw her own brain. "Just perfect," she sighed. Delay announcement in 3, 2. Instead of the expected crackly voice over the intercom, the entire subway car was engulfed in a shimmering blue light. Margo had just enough time to think, "This isn't the usual MTA incompetence," before she felt her body disintegrating. When she rematerialized, she was no longer on the 6 train surrounded by equally disgruntled New Yorkers. Instead, she stood in what appeared to be the world's most dramatic aquarium. Translucent walls revealed the vast blackness of space, punctuated by unfamiliar stars and what looked suspiciously like 3 moons orbiting a ringed planet. "You have got to be kidding me," she said to no one in particular. "Silence, Earth specimen," boomed a voice from behind her. Margo turned to find herself face to face, well, face to torso, really, with what could only be described as a walking lobster crossed with a bodybuilder. 8 feet tall, crimson exoskeleton, 4 arms, and wearing what looked like formal military attire that somehow accommodated all those limbs. "Let me guess," Margo said. "This is the part where you probe me and return me with vague memories and a newfound fear of flashlights." The creature chittered what might have been a laugh. "Your species' obsession with anal probing is both primitive and anatomically puzzling." Its mandibles clicked as it spoke. "I am Commander Krill of the Galactic Dominion. You have been selected for a much greater purpose." "Selected by whom?" "My LinkedIn profile?" "Randomly," Krill replied. "Your planet is of no significance whatsoever." "Harsh, but fair." Krill gestured with one of his 4 arms, and a holographic display appeared, showing what looked like a coliseum filled with various alien species battling each other while crowds cheered. "The Galactic Dominion has existed for 10,000 years, Krill explained, clearly launching into what Margo recognized as the alien equivalent of a corporate onboarding presentation. "Our society is built on the principles of honor, strength, and entertainment value. The grand arena is where all interspecies conflicts are resolved. So instead of war, you, what? Make species fight each other in a space thunderdome?" "Precisely. It prevents planetary destruction and provides exceptional viewership ratings." Margo pinched the bridge of her nose. "And you abducted me because every species must be represented. It is your honor to fight for Earth." "I'm an accountant." "I'm even better. The betting odds will be astronomical." As Krill led her through corridors filled with aliens of every conceivable shape and size, Margo learned the horrifying truth. Humans were considered the puppies of the galaxy, soft, fragile creatures with no natural defenses, existing primarily to be cooed at by more advanced species. "You realize I can't possibly survive this, right?" Margo asked as they passed what appeared to be a training room where a creature that looked like a sentient cactus was bench pressing what had to be several tons. "Of course not," Krill agreed cheerfully, "but your inevitable dismemberment will be broadcast across 17 galaxies. Your species will be remembered for your amusing death squeaks." "Comforting," Margo replied. "Always wanted to be famous." The processing center reminded Margo of the DMV, if the DMV was staffed by aliens and smelled like ammonia and despair. She was poked, prodded, scanned, and catalogued by creatures whose anatomy suggested their evolutionary path had taken a wrong turn at reasonable and kept going. Species human. Planet Earth. Combat experience, none. Special abilities, none. Natural weapons, none. The bored-looking alien, a floating jellyfish with too many eyes, recited from her scan results. Threat assessment, laughable. I'll have you know, I once won a slap fight with my college roommate, Margo protested. The jellyfish's many eyes blinked in asynchronous disinterest. Her new quarters were communal, shared with other low-tier combatants, as they were euphemistically called. In reality, they were cannon fodder creatures deemed too weak or unskilled to survive more than 1 or 2 matches. Among her roommates was Blork, a gelatinous cube with surprising emotional depth, Zingar, a fur-covered reptile who constantly shed, and Tipo, a small grey humanoid with enormous eyes who never stopped talking about conspiracy theories. "They're watching us right now, you know," Tipo whispered to Margo on her first night. "The observers. They control everything. Even the air we breathe is monitored for rebellious thoughts." "That's nice," Margo replied, wondering if alien insanity was contagious. On her second day, during what passed for breakfast, a nutrient paste that tasted like cardboard soaked in orange juice, the dining hall fell silent. Margo looked up from her unappetizing meal to see the crowd parting like the Red Sea. Through the gap strutted the most terrifying creature she had ever seen. 9 feet tall, with obsidian scales covering rippling muscles, eyes like molten gold, and teeth that would make a great white shark file a copyright infringement lawsuit. "Kraz-Tak," Blork whispered, his gelatinous form quivering, the apex warrior. "Undefeated for 12 cycles." Kraz-Tak surveyed the room like a lion eyeing a field of injured gazelles. His gaze settled on Margo, the only human in the facility. With deliberate slowness he approached her table. "I smell fear," he rumbled, his voice like gravel in a garbage disposal, "and weakness." He leaned down until his face was inches from hers, his breath hot and sulfuric. "You will make a fine appetizer, little earth thing." Margo, operating purely on the defensive sarcasm that had gotten her through high school, replied, "I'm actually quite high in cholesterol. Bad for your heart. Or hearts. However many you have." The dining hall gasped collectively. Kraz-Tak's eyes narrowed, then unexpectedly, he threw back his head and laughed a sound like thunder cracking. "This one has spirit," he announced to the room. "I will enjoy extinguishing it." With that, he strutted away, his tail leaving a crack in the floor where it had struck for emphasis. "You just signed your death warrant," Tipo informed her helpfully. Training began the next day. Each combatant was assigned an instructor, in Margo's case, a wizened, grey-skinned alien named Vex. Where most aliens in the facility were hulking monstrosities, Vex was barely 5 feet tall, with spindly limbs and a permanent expression of exhausted irritation. "Let me guess," Vex said when Margo reported for training. "You think you're special. You think you'll be the unlikely hero who overcomes all odds and emerges victorious. Actually, I was thinking I'd like to not die screaming on intergalactic television." Vex blinked his large, milky eyes. Lower expectations than most. He circled her, assessing, "Maybe you're not completely hopeless." Over the following days, Vex discovered something surprising. Humans, specifically Margo, possessed 2 traits rare in the galaxy: adaptability and pattern recognition. Where other species had evolved specialized skills for specific environments, humans were jacks of all trades. "Your species is weirdly balanced," Vex noted as Margo completed an obstacle course designed for beings with entirely different physiologies. "Not great at anything. Not terrible at everything." "You should put that on Earth's travel brochures," Margo panted, collapsing in exhaustion. Margo's first arena match came too soon. Their opponent, a 6-armed, poison-spitting creature called a Ventraxian. The arena itself was a massive bowl-shaped structure, with force fields separating spectators from the violence below. Hovering cameras captured every angle for the billions watching across the galaxy. Standing in the entrance tunnel, Margo felt her knees weaken. "I can't do this," she whispered. Vex, beside her, snorted. "Of course you can't, not conventionally anyway." He handed her what looked like a small remote control. "But conventional isn't your style, is it?" "What's this?" "Arena environmental controls. usually reserved for the game masters, but I've had 300 years to make friends in low places. Margo stared at the device. Is this legal? Technically no, practically yes. There are no rules against intelligence in the arena. Just don't get caught. When her name announced as the human anomaly boomed through the stadium, Margo walked into the blinding lights to the sound of mocking laughter and enthusiastic betting on how quickly she would die. The Ventraxian, twice her size and oozing confidence, circled her like prey. On Vex's advice, Margo had spent her training time studying alien biology rather than attempting to build muscle she'd never have. Now, as the Ventraxian lunged, she hit a button on the remote. The gravity in one section of the arena suddenly intensified. The Ventraxian, caught mid-leap, crashed to the ground under its own multiplied weight. Ventraxians, Margo had learned, had hollow bones an advantage in their low-gravity homeworld, a critical weakness here. While the crowd gasped in confusion, Margo calmly walked over to her immobilized opponent and placed her foot on one of its thin arms. Yield, she said simply. The Ventraxian, understanding the unstated threat to its fragile limbs, hissed in surrender. The arena fell silent, then erupted in a mix of outrage and begrudging applause. No one had expected the match to last more than 10 seconds, let alone end with the human victorious. In the following weeks, Margo became the arena's most controversial fighter. Unlike the bloody spectacles audiences expected, her matches were tactical puzzles. Against a creature that navigated by echolocation, she used the environmental controls to create a cacophony of sound reflections. Against a fire-breathing behemoth, she flooded its section of the arena with fire-retardant foam. The betting syndicates were furious. The audiences were divided. The arena management was suspicious but couldn't prove she was doing anything against the rules. Her fellow combatants began to look at her differently, some with respect, others with resentment. Krastak watched her matches with growing interest, his golden eyes calculating. "You're becoming a problem," Vex informed her after her 5th consecutive victory. "The odds makers can't figure you out, and that's bad for business. Isn't survival supposed to be the point?" "No," Vex said firmly. "Entertainment is the point. Survival is incidental." Margo's growing fame or infamy attracted attention from the arena's management. The promoters wanted her to play up the clever human angle. Merchandisers created action figures, depicting her in heroic poses she had never actually struck. A particularly enthusiastic fan club of methane-breathing aliens adopted her as their patron saint for reasons she couldn't begin to comprehend. It all came to a head when she was matched against Drog, Krastak's lieutenant and close ally. A vicious, spiked creature with a reputation for prolonging his opponent's suffering, Drog was clearly meant to be Margo's executioner. The match was brutal. Drog was not only strong but cunning, anticipating her tactical approach and countering it. For the first time, Margo found herself truly fighting for her life, her environmental controls limited by Drog's awareness of her methods. In desperation, she resorted to psychological warfare, the one area where humans excelled. "Does Krastak know?" she gasped, dodging a swipe of Drog's claws. "Know what?" Drog snarled, momentarily confused. "About your little side deal with the Zordak's betting ring," Margo improvised wildly. "The one where you're supposed to throw your next match against him for the championship." It was complete nonsense, but the seed of doubt was planted. Drog's momentary hesitation was all she needed. A quick adjustment of the arena floor's texture, and the spiked warrior slipped, impaling himself on his own quills, a non-fatal but excruciating injury that forced him to yield. The crowd roared with delight at the unexpected twist. Only one being was not amused. Krastak, watching from his private box, crushed a solid metal goblet in his clawed hand and vowed revenge. The challenge came 3 days later, and not through official channels, but in the form of Krastak himself, who cornered Margo in a training facility corridor. "You humiliated my lieutenant," he growled, looming over her. Even in the brightly lit hallway, shadows seemed to cling to his scaled form. "Technically humiliated himself," Margo replied, backing against the wall. "I just provided the opportunity." Krastak's laugh held no humor. "I've watched you, human, your tricks and devices, your strategies." He spat the word like it was obscene. "In the end, you are still prey, and I am the greatest predator the arena has ever known. Is this the part where you challenge me to a fight to the death? Because if so, I'd like to request a rain check. Maybe in 70 years when I'm on my deathbed anyway." 2 days, Krastak said, ignoring her attempt at humor. "The grand arena. No environmental controls, no tricks. Just you and me." As he stalked away, Margo slid down the wall to sit on the floor, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "You're completely screwed," came Vex's voice from nearby. The old alien emerged from an alcove where he'd been eavesdropping. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." "It's not about confidence," Vex said, sitting beside her with a grunt. "It's about biology. Krastak is a draconian. His species evolved as apex predators on a death world with 3 times Earth's gravity. His scales can deflect energy weapons. His blood is naturally toxic. His muscles—" "I get it," Margo interrupted. "He's perfect. I'm toast." "Oh, not perfect," Vex corrected. "Just overwhelming. There's a difference." "Does the difference matter when I'm equally dead either way?" Vex was silent for a long moment. "Then, perhaps not, but since you're dead anyway, you might as well know the truth." "About what?" "Oh, about humans. About why you're really here." Back in her quarters, Margo paced frantically. Vex's revelation had turned everything she thought she knew upside down. Humans weren't random selections or comic relief for the arena. They were carefully chosen test subjects. The Galactic Dominion had been monitoring Earth for centuries, watching humans overcome seemingly impossible odds through history. They had a theory that human adaptability might be the evolutionary key to creating better warriors. Margo's matches had been experiments, designed to test human problem-solving under extreme stress. If she somehow defeated Krastak, or even gave him a decent fight, the Dominion would accelerate their plans to harvest more humans for their breeding program. If she died quickly, humanity would be written off as a failed experiment. "So I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't," she muttered. "And definitely damned," added Tipo helpfully from his bunk. Margo spent the next day in the arena archives, studying every recording of Krastak's fights. There were hundreds. Not once had the champion even been seriously injured, let alone defeated. His fighting style was brutally efficient, adapting to each opponent's weaknesses. But as Margo watched fight after fight, a pattern emerged not in Krastak's fighting, but in his pre-fight ritual. Before each match, he would pause at the arena entrance, close his eyes, and inhale deeply before charging in. "Computer," she said to the archive terminal, "what's the atmospheric composition of Krastak's home world?" The data appeared on screen. Among the expected elements was an unusual gas called kryllium, a stimulant that draconians had evolved alongside, which enhanced their natural aggression and strength. "And is kryllium present in the arena atmosphere?" she asked. "Affirmative. Arena atmospheres are customized to provide optimal combat conditions for higher-tier competitors." A plan, a desperate, probably suicidal plan, began to form in Margo's mind. The day of the match, the grand arena was packed beyond capacity. The fight between the undefeated champion and the improbable human had captured the imagination of the galaxy. Viewing rights had been sold to 17,000 worlds. Betting had reached unprecedented levels, with the odds against Margo so astronomical that the numbers could no longer be displayed on standard boards. In the preparation chamber, Margo sat calmly as attendants applied the traditional combat markings to her face, red lines symbolizing courage, or in her case, in foolhardy acceptance of certain doom. Vex entered, looking more concerned than she'd ever seen him. "The atmospheric controls are set as you requested," he said quietly, "though I still don't understand what you're planning." "Good," Margo replied. "If you can't figure it out, neither can he. You know there's no shame in forfeiting." Margo smiled. "Actually, there is. Quite a lot of it. Besides, I have a plan." "A plan," Vex repeated skeptically. against the most lethal warrior in the galaxy. It's probably going to fail spectacularly, she admitted, but at least it'll be entertaining. The tunnel leading to the arena floor seemed longer than it had for her previous matches. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a physical wall of sound. As she stepped onto the sand-covered floor, the noise peaked, then hushed expectantly. Across the arena, from the champion's tunnel, emerged Krastak. In full battle regalia, he was even more terrifying, obsidian armor accentuating his natural weapons, ceremonial daggers strapped to his limbs, his scales oiled to a deadly sheen. He paused at the entrance, closed his eyes, and inhaled deeply, exactly as Margo had seen in the recordings. But this time, instead of the Kryllium-enhanced air that would heighten his combat abilities, he breathed in something very different. The match announcer's voice boomed. The grand champion, Krastak, versus the human anomaly. Great fight to submission or death. Begin. Krastak opened his eyes and stumbled. Just slightly, barely noticeable to the crowd, but to Margo it confirmed her gamble might pay off. The champion charged, but his movements lacked their usual precision. His first swipe, which should have removed Margo's head from her shoulders, missed by inches. His follow-up tail strike connected, sending her tumbling across the sand, but with less force than expected. Rolling to her feet, Margo didn't attempt to fight back. Instead, she dodged and weaved, letting Krastak expend energy in increasingly frustrated attacks. Stand and fight, coward. He roared, his voice slightly slurred. Why? Margo taunted, dancing away from another swipe. Not feeling quite yourself today. The crowd, sensing something was wrong with their champion, began to murmur. Krastak, hearing their uncertainty, grew more enraged and less coordinated. 20 minutes into what should have been a 10-second slaughter, Krastak was sweating, his movements erratic. Instead of precise killing strikes, he was now blindly charging, trying to use raw power to compensate for his inexplicably diminished reflexes. "What have you done?" he gasped, after a particularly wild lunge left him off balance. Margo, exhausted but still uninjured, circled him warily. "I read your file. Draconians evolved breathing Kryllium. It's what gives you your edge. But your species has another interesting trait, a severe reaction to concentrated nitrogen compounds." "Impossible," Krastak slurred. "The arena, controls, they were adjusted. Right now you're breathing an atmosphere with 15% more nitrogen than your system can handle. Not enough to be immediately toxic, but enough to make you drunk. Very, very drunk." The champion staggered, his legendary reflexes now comically dulled. The crowd, realizing what was happening, erupted in a mixture of outrage and wild amusement. Krastak made one final, desperate lunge. Margo sidestepped a move that would have failed against the champion at full capacity and used his momentum to send him crashing face first into the arena wall. The impact wasn't nearly enough to seriously injure the Draconian, but in his nitrogen-impaired state, it left him dazed and disoriented. Before he could recover, Margo had grabbed one of his ceremonial daggers and pressed it against a spot on his neck, the location of the carotid artery in Draconians, according to the biological data she'd studied. "Yield," she said, loud enough for the arena's audio pickups to capture. Krastak, his golden eyes unfocused, tried to rise only to feel the blade press harder. "I said yield," Margo repeated. "Unless you want the galaxy to watch you bleed out from a wound inflicted by a soft, weak human." The crowd fell silent, every being holding their breath. Never in 12 cycles had Krastak been defeated. Never had he yielded. "I yield," he finally growled, the words barely audible. Margo stepped back immediately, dropping the dagger. The crowd remained stunned for one heartbeat. Two then exploded in chaos. Half enraged, half ecstatic, the spectators couldn't decide whether to riot or celebrate the most unlikely upset in arena history. The aftermath was even more chaotic than the match itself. Accusations of cheating were met with counter-arguments that atmospheric manipulation had always been permitted for high-profile matches. Betting syndicates collapsed overnight. 3 minor religious cults declared Margo either a messiah or a demon. Tak, once he sobered up, demanded a rematch, then abruptly withdrew his challenge after a private meeting with arena officials. Rumors circulated that he had been shown evidence of certain biological weaknesses that all species possessed, and that perhaps the draconian supremacy wasn't as absolute as previously believed. 1 week after the match, Margo was summoned to the administrative level of the arena complex, a place combatants never saw unless they were being executed for rule violations. Instead of executioners, she found Commander Krill and a dozen other high-ranking Dominion officials waiting. Margo Jenkins, Krill's mandibles clicked in what she now recognized as amusement. "You have created quite the political situation." "Sorry about that," she replied. "Not sorry at all. Hard to think about galactic politics when you're focused on not becoming alien kibble." "Precisely the response we expected," said another official, a floating orb with tentacles that Margo recognized as a member of the Dominion's ruling council. "Adaptability, resourcefulness, and a remarkable talent for exploiting weaknesses." Thanks. It was not a compliment," the orb replied. "It was an assessment. One that has forced a re-evaluation of your species." Commander Krill stepped forward. "Humans were never meant to be permanent arena combatants, Ms. Jenkins. You were being evaluated for a different purpose. As breeding stock," Margo said flatly. "Vex told me." The officials exchanged glances. "That is partially correct," Krill admitted, "but not in the crude way you imagine. Your genetic adaptability, your species' unique talent for finding unconventional solutions, is what interests us." "Turns out," interrupted a familiar voice, "humans aren't the puppies of the galaxy after all." Vex emerged from behind the gathered officials. "We're more like the cockroaches, surprisingly hardy and impossible to eliminate." "We?" Margo frowned. Then her eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You're human." Vex grinned. And for the first time, Margo noticed how similar his basic structure was to human anatomy, despite the grey skin and oversized eyes. Genetically modified, 7th generation. "My ancestors were abducted 300 years ago when we first detected your species' potential. But if humans are so special, why keep us isolated? Why not just invite Earth to join your galactic club?" The floating orb emitted what might have been a laugh. "Because you're dangerous, Ms. Jenkins. One human alone caused the most significant upset in arena history. Imagine a planet of 7 billion, all with your adaptive capabilities, all integrating into galactic society. Most species evolve to fit specific ecological niches. Humans adapt to change niches themselves. So what happens now?" Margo asked. "Now," Krill said, "we negotiate. Your victory has forced the Dominion to acknowledge humanity's potential. We are prepared to offer Earth provisional membership in the Galactic Dominion under certain controlled conditions. And if Earth refuses, that," Vex interjected, "is where you come in as the official human representative." Margo blinked. "I'm an accountant. You're the human who made Tak beg," corrected the orb, "in galactic politics that carries significant weight." 3 months later, Margo stood before the United Nations General Assembly, flanked by Commander Krill and Vex. The initial panic over alien contact had subsided into cautious curiosity. Now came the hard part, explaining to Earth's leaders why they should trust the same aliens who had abducted their citizens for combat experiments. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margo began, feeling surreal addressing the world's most powerful people when just a few months ago she'd been filling out expense reports. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The galaxy is a mess. Species fight each other for entertainment. Advanced civilizations see us as evolutionary curiosities. And I'm somehow your chief negotiator because I got an alien warlord drunk in a cosmic gladiatorial arena." Nervous laughter rippled through the assembly. "But here's the thing, they're afraid of us. Not because we're strong or technologically advanced, but because we're unpredictable. We don't specialize, we generalize. We don't accept limitations, we find workarounds. In a galaxy of hyper-specialized species, humanity's greatest strength is our stubborn refusal to stay in our lane." She gestured to the aliens beside her. "The Galactic Dominion wants to control our integration into their society. They're offering technology, knowledge, and protection but limited autonomy. They think humanity needs training wheels. And what do you recommend, Ms. Jenkins? Asked the Secretary General. Margo smiled. I recommend we accept their offer with conditions of our own. Because if one human accountant with no combat training can upend their most sacred institution, imagine what we could do with actual preparation. Later, as Earth's leaders debated the proposal, Margo stood on the UN building's rooftop terrace with Vex, looking out over New York City. They'll accept, Vex said confidently. Humans never can resist a challenge. Is that what you're counting on? Margo asked. That we'll be so excited about space that we won't notice we're being manipulated. Vex's expression grew serious. I'm counting on humanity doing what it's always done, taking whatever scraps it's given and turning them into something no one expected. He looked up at the night sky. The Dominion thinks they're getting glorified problem solvers who will know their place. What they're actually getting is a species that turned a death sentence into a diplomatic mission. All because I made one alien beg for mercy, Margo mused. No, Vex corrected. All because you did what humans do best, you changed the rules of the game. In the years that followed, humanity proved Vex right. What began as tightly controlled integration quickly expanded as humans demonstrated their value across multiple disciplines. Atmospheric manipulation techniques pioneered by Margo became standard practice in environmental engineering. Earth's diplomatic corps, trained in identifying species-specific vulnerabilities, became renowned negotiators. And in the grand arena, a new class of human combatants emerged not as fodder, but as champions who approached each match as a puzzle to be solved rather than a test of brute strength. Margo herself never returned to accounting. As Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Dominion, she dedicated herself to expanding humanity's influence. Her office featured just one decorative item, a ceremonial draconian dagger mounted in a case with a simple inscription. Never bring claws to a nitrogen fight. The galaxy would never be the same.